how can we align and connect human technology and nature technology more, because it's very key, it's very clear that if we're going to have a great future, a thriving future for humanity, we really need to get much better at aligning human technology and nature technology, like the amazing technologies of nature that are all around us. I think we have the choice to tell whatever stories we want about things, and this is why I think we see, so much political polarization, right? That there's this concept of alternative facts, right? Like something can happen or some set of things can happen, and people will look at the same thing. It's like, here's a glass. Is it half full or half empty? Well, it's the same actual thing, but people will describe it differently because of their orientation. I think the question for us really is like, what are the stories that we tell each other about the future? Because those stories really impact how we experience the future, how we use the technologies. If we're telling each other this is going to destroy everything and the future is horrible, then that's the experience we're going to have.
Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Future Hacker. I'm your host, Maria Taide, and today we're diving into the future of technology with Neil Redding, a renowned near futurist and a keynote speaker. Neil is the CEO and founder of Redding Futures, a boutique consultancy that unlocks the possibilities of AI, spatial computing, and emerging technologies for world-class companies like Visa, Nike, and Apple. He's here to share insights on how these technologies are transforming our world and how we can co-create our future. So everything to do with us, right? Stay tuned for an inspiring conversation that's going to challenge how you think about technology and its impact on our lives. And don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with your friends. Hi, Neil. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Connecting from New York City. So very excited to connect with you in Sao Paulo, right?
Exactly. And, you told me you have a Brazilian network here as well. So, I hope you can engage with some new people with this interview as well.
Absolutely. So, boa tarde, all my Brazilian friends. I met a lot of people at South by Southwest this year. So very excited to be visiting very soon as well. So watch out for that, or follow me on LinkedIn to learn about.
Yeah, Brazilians are surely dominating South by Southwest. We have legions of people
true.
going.
Amazing.
So, Neil, you've had a very interesting career journey, right? So I'd love if we could share more about some pieces of it. So to start with, and I do love these sides of yours of merging, philosophy principles with the world of computer science. So how has this been working for you, and how has it changed your perspectives on human behavior, innovation, and new technologies?
Sure, thanks. So as you're referencing, I studied computer science and philosophy, a double major, as they call this, in college. And I actually got to college on a music scholarship. I had played piano and studied piano my whole childhood. So I have these multiple different kinds of backgrounds. And I think we understand our own life path in retrospect, we sort of tell ourselves stories and tell each other stories about, why has it gone the way it's gone? So the way I see my life and the narrative that I use to understand it is that I've always been interested in how disparate or apparently different things connect with each other. And when I studied philosophy, I decided to do both philosophy and computer science. The heads of each of these departments, like philosophy is a humanities and computer science is a science, and the people who ran these departments at college were like, why are you doing both these different things?
Exactly, yeah.
But I really saw that there was so much, not just in the curriculum, but then there were some things that we studied in both philosophy and computer science, actually, like theories of language and theories of how meaning is encoded into language and things like this, which apply both to philosophy and computer science. But also, I did a lot of reading and studying and just thinking, I think, about how different things that seem different are actually connected. And so I really see my whole career as being focused on themes of connection and interconnectedness between humans and technology. Like right out of college, I started creating software for Macintosh computer and Mac OS. And so it was this graphical user interface. I mean, I started doing this in the 90s, so it's been a while. But back then, having these windows and buttons and menus and things that felt like physical items was really interesting to me psychologically, about how to make computers meet humans more where we are already, using our language, our metaphors, our visual modes. And really for the past, it's been about 30 years, I've been creating software and then creating digital elements of brand campaigns, in the New York agency world. Once I stopped creating software, being a software developer, which I did for about 15 years. And then over the past 10 years or so, I've continued to build software systems that connect digital and physical in what architects call the built environment, creating digital experience in physical space, and then simulations of physical spaces in VR and AR and spatial computing. So kind of my whole career, it's been a journey of just following what's interesting to me in terms of connecting digital and physical, connecting humans and computers. And recently, more and more, like looking at how can we align and connect human technology and nature technology more, because it's very key, it's very clear that if we're going to have a great future, a thriving future for humanity, we really need to get much better at aligning human technology and nature technology, like the amazing technologies of nature that are all around us. So that's kind of the overall kind of perspective, I think, that I have for my own life and what I'm doing into the near future.
And I can see how it's getting even more relevant. How what you somehow foreseen like decades ago, it's like I think that you just got it right, like the right path, right? And the way that technology is evolving and the discussions that we've been having recently, around human behavior and ethics and AI development, and even biomimicry, that's how I say it. I know in Portuguese it's biomimética, biomimicry, I don't know.
Biomimicry in English?
Biomimicry, exactly. It's getting even more relevant to get the convergence of everything. So I think that you were somehow a visionary back in the years, right?
I feel like I was just stumbling through life, honestly. But I mean, I think I've had good fortune, good instincts, perhaps, good curiosity. Like all of us, I think, what really gets us excited is just we're curious. Like, how does this work? What could we do with this, right?
Exactly.
I mean, the whole idea of hacking is just that, right? It's like, what could we do with these things we have, So curiosity.
Yeah. Perfectly put. And, and then how did it transition from, developing softwares and working with innovation and computer science to becoming a near futurist?
Sure. So as I started to say, I for 15 years out of school, I was really excited to just do software development, write software, do software engineering, build applications, build products, do consulting, building custom software, all the way through when I got to, and I worked for companies in Silicon Valley at first, Apple and Oracle and various other startups through the 90s. And then first part of the aughts, as we call it here, I don't know, like the 2000s, I came to New York and helped build a consultancy that was focused on Wall Street, like big investment banks, financial services companies, and building custom software to help traders, execute trades or help people report on transactions and do analysis and so on. But I got to a point in 2008 where I decided I just didn't enjoy coding all the time anymore. And I wanted to stay close to the technology, but also and still make great money, but not code all the time, So I thought, what could I do? And I knew a bunch of people in New York in the agency world, and the world of creative agencies for brands was starting to really realize that having technologists in the room when you're imagining or ideating a creative campaign for a brand was really, really important, because both because you need to know what's possible and what's not possible, and So I spent a bunch of time transitioning from software engineering into working with some big agencies, small agencies, big agencies, including BBDO and Ogilvy and Mediacom, and ones that I think are internationally known too. And then actually from that, I got more and more interested in the tangible aspects of digital experience. As people had these black slabs in our hands all the time, right? Like, what can we do to create a more and more physically engaging experience? And so I could talk about spending some time running digital experience at Gensler, this big architecture firm, where it was like, wow, what can we do if the canvas for digital experiences the whole space, like a 3D physical space, like a store or a hotel or a mall or something. And so then that kind of got me going this past 10 years of digital and physical coming together. And so I think I've had the good fortune of, doing enough software engineering that I really understand how digital things get built, fundamentally how they work. To then be able to do this past 10 or so years of work that I've done, which is more about high-level strategy and concept design and system or ecosystem design across digital and physical touch points.
And one of the many things that I find interesting in your journey is that, as you said, you started like coding, which is a more, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? The image that we have is that it's a more introspective and lonely and work. People usually, they have a different, how do you say, personality, and now you're like a speaker, and which is expected to be a very extrovert thing to do, as much as we have many introverts being speakers and teaching, but they're very different sides of personality that you have to use. It's a big transition in my mind, at least, right?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Maria. I think for me, I saw myself as a shy person, kind of maybe introverted, and so I did enjoy for many years just being by myself in front of the computer. I could make things, make virtual things, write code that made the machine do things. And that was super interesting to me. But I really see, again, this kind of continuity between programming languages that make the machine do things, and then language as a speaker, even in front of a room, that can kind of maybe not make people do things, although I think having people leave the room after a keynote that I give and feel like, oh, now I have tools that I can use to do some things with. But there's a way that I find that language with, person to person also really creates outcomes in the world. And I think, to your point, though, I did reach a point where I felt just more and more interested in people. And I was always scared, to be honest. And I'm still, when I get on stage, I'm like, oh shit, like what's going to happen? I don't know. Like, will I forget something? Will I mess up? It feels like the stakes are a little bit high when you're on stage in front of hundreds or thousands of people, but it's very exciting and it's very enlivening. I feel very alive in a way that I never really did writing code. So, there are different things. I think I'm just challenging myself more and more in my life, especially as I get older, to just do the things that scare me, because that's where the growth is, that's where we really grow, when we do things that we think, wow, that would be cool, but it's scary,
Yeah, I totally get it. And talking about your experience of being a keynote speaker in events like, as you mentioned, South by Southwest, also Building the Future, is there any one memorable moment or takeaway from those speaking engagements that you could share with us?
Sure. So, I think there's a number of moments this year. So this year was the first time I was solo on stage at South by Southwest. And I say that because last year I did a 2-person presentation with a friend of mine. But this year I did this talk. I worked on it for months. I was very happy with it. But you never know. But I got really great positive feedback. I met so many actually Brazilians as well as other people, but made so many new friends. And I think I'll say a kind of moment. There was a number of these moments, but after the talk, I mean, people came up to me, were sharing what they got from the talk, which is very, makes me very happy. I feel gratified. But many times throughout the week, because I spoke early in the week, I would just be sitting or standing outside in public and strangers would come up to me and say, great talk. I love that. Let's connect because I have some other idea where you can, bring your talk to my company, or let's connect. We'll talk about this. But that was a new experience for me. It was like a little bit of being famous in Austin, for a few days. But it's just really, really fun to have people come up to me in public and just thank me for the talk, or share something that they remembered even a few days later, So that makes me really happy. And I think that's part of the magic of being in a small city with so many people for a week. You just keep running into people. And people are like, I saw you at this thing and I want to share something, and so there's this vibe of people just talk to each other.
Of course, that's such a great environment. I'm curious, what's your thoughts on the type of content produced at these events? And do you feel that they are effectively framing our possible futures into something actionable today? And the reason I'm asking you that is that sometimes I feel that these events, they can present a more dystopian view of the future. I personally had this experience, right? That I went to an event and the person was supposed to talk about, the trends and the future. And it was such a dystopian view that instead of motivating people to learn more and to change and just to apply small things into their daily tasks that it will make a difference, they were like, okay, I quit, I'll retire, I will do something else. And I was like, you're backfiring completely because the message that so how do you feel like that, and I know it's super individual and each speaker will have a style and things like that, but we also know that dystopia sells more, and that's the reason we have so much data on entertainment, for instance. So getting back to those events, how do you feel that it's being framed?
You mean South by Southwest specifically, or?
Not specifically, but you've been walking around innovation events for a while. So in general, how do you feel that people are not only getting the content from, but how people are receiving to that?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I would not go again to a conference that felt like just dystopian and depressing. I mean, going back to what I was saying earlier, right? I think we have the choice to tell whatever stories we want about things, and this is why I think we see, so much political polarization, right? That there's this concept of alternative facts, right? Like something can happen or some set of things can happen and people will look at the same thing. It's like, here's a glass. Is it half full or half empty? Well, it's the same actual thing, but people will describe it differently because of their orientation, right? And I think if we think about, what's actually happening with AI or with spatial computing, simulation, with social media, with technologies that are powerful and dangerous and could create very difficult outcomes. I mean, some of these, like social media, have already been creating really problematic outcomes, like not just Arab Spring, say, but also starting wars or creating, political dissension and antagonism and so on. So I think it's really up to us to decide, what stories we want to tell about the technology and where it's going. And it's also up to us to create this technology, right? I mean, humans are creating all this technology. And I think my orientation fundamentally as a technologist is that we don't know the future, right? I mean, we don't know where things are going. I think the idea that something is totally good or totally bad, totally beneficial or totally destructive, I think all of those ideas are human inventions, right? I think anything real is going to have nuance. It's going to have multiple facets to it. I think anything powerful can be used to create beautiful outcomes or destructive outcomes. And I think what I do really strongly believe is that we live inside the stories that we tell ourselves and each other. And so if we tell stories, and when I say stories, I mean story in a broad sense, like, how are we describing the future we're creating with technology? Is it like AI is going to destroy humanity and take over everything, to ruin our creativity? Or is AI going to assist us to be even more creative or work at a higher level because we don't have to maybe have the fine technical maker skills that we used to maybe. I mean, these are just one example, right? People are concerned about AI's impact on creativity. But I think the question for us really is like, what are the stories that we tell each other about the future? Because those stories really impact how we experience the future, how we use the technologies. If we're telling each other this is going to destroy everything and the future is horrible, then that's the experience we're going to have, So, I mean, even right now, right? I don't mean to belabor this point too much, but right now in the world, right? Is this world in a horrible state or is it in a wonderful state? I think it's both. I think we can tell stories about horrifying wars, and we can tell stories about incredible inventions and amazing acts of kindness and generosity and, amazing accomplishments that humans are making, and lots of kindness and love for each other. So, I mean, it's all true. The question is, what do we decide to talk about? Where do we decide to focus? And I think that's, when I've grown up as a technologist, as we described, and so that's my kind of passion in a deeper way than I really even fully understand. But what I want to do with it is help people understand that technology is evolving kind of just like we are at this point. Kevin Kelly wrote a book in, I think 2010 called What Technology Wants. And I reference it a little bit in my South by Southwest talk, which, by the way, there's a video of that for any of your listeners that want to watch it. We'll put that in the show notes maybe, or point people to it. But you talked about Kevin Kelly in this book, What Technology Wants, about how technology has its own evolution. Like it's kind of evolving like it's another species, or like it's another set of species, or you might even call it a kingdom in the biological sense, and especially now with AI, and people talk a lot about AGI, this idea that AI has its own trajectory. Maybe it even makes sense to think it has its own desired outcomes. But I think of us humans as a species, that we're on this planet evolving along with these technologies now. We're going to have AI agents very soon. I mean, we kind of already do, but I think out of the box, there's going to be AI agent tools this year from OpenAI and Anthropic and others. And I think of these AI agents as participants in these connected ecosystems that we're like working alongside AIs now, or working alongside other kinds of technologies. And so all of this is like, this is kind of a story, I think, that I'm telling when I speak, right, about technology. It's that I use this language very intentionally, that we exist on this planet with these technologies, and let's collaborate with them. Let's co-create this future that we want to live in, So does that make sense? I mean, so this is kind of a story or a narrative framework that I think it's not dystopian, right? It's like, okay, like we find ourselves on this planet with people and technologies and creatures, and some of them are easy to work with and some of them maybe are not so easy to work with, but let's do it. Like we're here, we have this opportunity. So
so I'm with you on that, right? But I think that in order for us to do a good job, with the technologies that we've been creating, I feel that education is a critical part, and we are lacking a lot. I don't think our current education system is set up for that. and even the way that companies function today, they're up to speed. And I do believe that educating people is a big part of our job, you and I, and many people that are listening as well. So, how do you perceive the level of education and openness at your clients, for example, companies that you have been talking to, institutions that you have been talking to, towards future preparedness and building an innovative environment, and if they are aware of what are the stakes? Because, in my view, at the very least, it's not just about education, but the way that we function, like the way that, uh, even our old hierarchical model in a company is outdated already when talking about building an innovative culture and make people feel that they have a safe environment to question, to be more creative, or else we're just going to be relying on whatever appears on the screen and be building up to something that is not even prepared yet. Does it make sense to you?
It does. So I feel there's a lot in there, I think. I mean, some of it is about, so I'll try to take those questions in order. So in terms of what I see with corporate leaders, right? People leading companies. I mean, I've worked inside lots of companies. I've consulted with lots of companies. A company or a corporation is also kind of a story, right? Like when you work inside a company, you create and you tell these stories about what are we about? Like, what are our values? What are we trying to do in the world? Especially if you've got a strong brand, right? Because then you probably have an agency working with you to help define what is this brand? What is the story of the brand? So there's so much, people that work at a company, or especially at high levels, are very, very clear about how they see the world, right? They have this story about how they see the world. And so anything that doesn't fit into that story, I think, is very hard to assimilate or sort of bring on, right? So, I mean, this is just a long way of talking about disruption, right? I mean, existing companies that have a particular business model, they sell these products, they offer these services, they do it in this way, they have this organizational structure. AI, certainly AI broadly, I mean, and also technologies like spatial computing or other kinds of emerging tech or even just software generally, mobile apps even, have been very disruptive for all kinds of businesses. And so, honestly, the more established a business is, the more, I think, reluctant it tends to be, the more difficult it is for them to really get actively interested in building the kinds of things that a team I would lead would come in, or in a strategy engagement that I would bring to a company. Often we'll do strategy engagements around near futurism, like connecting, which I describe near futurism as really just connecting what's emerging as possible today with immediate practical value for the clients that we work with. And it's relatively easy for companies to reach out and hire us, hire me, hire Reading Futures, my company, to do this kind of workshop. What's the current state of the business? What's now emerging as new possibilities, AI, spatial computing, other tech, and then connecting these dots, right? Okay, so how does this new possibility, how can we use it to improve this aspect of the business, right? Connecting possible and practical. So that kind of workshop that we call near future workshop, it's easy to engage with if you're a business leader. It's easy for us to deliver. But then the question is, okay, what comes out of that, and how does the business evolve from there? And that's where it gets much more difficult, because inevitably, these ideas, these hypotheses that come out of these workshops imply changing some aspect of the business model. And this is the nature of disruption. And I think, as we've seen, if businesses don't disrupt themselves, if they don't do the difficult work of evolving how they do business, then other companies are going to show up and deliver the same kind of product or service more efficiently, more cheaply, in a way that's more fun, more accessible to younger people, like whatever it is, right? And and that traditional business is going to, over time, lose out, right, or become irrelevant. So that's a long way of saying there are always challenges. I mean, at the same time, there's always interest, in learning about the near future, what's emerging, new possibilities. I mean, it's great. Business leaders, of course, love to show up for that and learn and get excited and know. So the next time they're in a gathering or an executive retreat or a cocktail party and whatever, it's great to just know what's going on, right? But there certainly are challenges in terms of actually engaging. And so what we really try to do simply is make action as easy to take as possible, right? So we just create these hypotheses coming out of our strategy engagements that just say, if we did X, if we did this thing, if we applied this technology, this new capability to this aspect of the business, we would expect this outcome. And these hypotheses are articulated. They're like written down in a way that they can be prototyped easily and quickly. Sometimes the prototype is, let's build something and put it in market. Or sometimes the prototype is, let's just do a focus group with an idea, or do some research. But the point is that what comes out of these workshops is actionable. It's easy, relatively easy to prototype and test the idea. So that's a lot. And I think that answered just the first part of your question. Do you want to go back to you asked a couple different things there.
I don't even remember.
Okay.
No worries. It's just going with the flow here. But I do think that there's an important message here of going beyond the learning piece and turning
Yes, you talked about education.
into action.
You're asking about education.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, and so that was the other big question that you asked. Thanks for the reminder about people, just education broadly, right? I think not just for business leaders, but just for everybody, right? How do people learn
and the way
about
that we're
technologies?
consuming, really, right? The thing is that if we think about how we used to learn as kids, right? And it was just about reading books and answering whichever questions in the way that the book would present us, and how it doesn't fit anymore at all. And the way that a younger generation is used to consuming content is very different from the way that institutions in general are trying to teach people. So I feel that there's a really big gap, and it's not going to be easy to change as much as we have new schools showing up and testing those different models. I feel there should be at least a higher sense of urgency, right? Because there's a language gap between generations that are already affecting the big companies as well, not only the educational system. So at least this is not even a question, but just something to discuss and a line of thought of how we should be approaching this new educational model, not only for the youth, but also for people that are already in the market, because now it's the time to start questioning, being curious, as you said, and not just accepting whatever it is. I can't tell you how many times I heard on my previous jobs, and AI wasn't there. Like, oh, we've been doing that for 20 years and it's been working, so there's nothing to change. And there's no room for this type of phrase anymore, right?
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think I just came from a morning gathering here in New York of where there was questions about purpose and sustainability in business, and there was a lot of conversation about the gap between sort of performative sustainability, or like presenting publicly like you're behaving sustainably as a business, versus what you're actually doing. And then conversation about how, well, the kids, the young people, the college students, the high school students, I mean, they're just requiring businesses to be authentic and to be aligned. Like, what you better do what you say you do, otherwise we're not buying your stuff, right? And so that kind of holding businesses accountable and requirement of a kind of integrity I'm just reminded of that because what we're talking about here in various ways is that, and you and I remember this, right? We're not too old to forget this, that, when you're young and you're becoming aware of the world, you have this very idealistic view. You're just like, I know how things should be, and I'm just going to make them this way, right? Like, I'm going to require that people behave this way. Everybody should like this band, this artist. Every business should operate this way. Every business should make this kind of thing. There's this kind of audacious know-it-all, but idealism, right? I mean, kids have this amazing way, young people, right? Of just, the world should be this way. Let's make it this way. And I think similarly, kids, our daughter, for years, she was asking, can I get a Facebook? When she was like 6, 7, 8, whatever, her friends have a Facebook. And we're like, no, when you're old enough. But then eventually she just went and did it herself because she figured it out. And I think kids, at various ages will figure out how to use ChatGPT, how to use various other kinds of tools. And all of this is just to say, more and more, I think kids are leading, like, this is how they want to live. This is how they want to learn. They're just taking the tools because it's accessible to them. They have computers, they have phones, they can do these things. So I think, in many ways, adults, those of us that set curriculum for schools or that run schools or run colleges or run any kind of training institution or educational institution, are going to be following the lead of the younger people, the people that we want to teach, because by their behavior, I think they're showing how they learn, how they want to learn, and I mean, this is a lot of what's driving interest. I've done a lot of work in VR and AR and what used to be called, or sometimes some places of the world still is called, the metaverse, right? But the number one, there's two big reasons why, those of us in the immersive or XR industry talk about, like, why should businesses care about VR, AR, or XR, right? One is for training, right? Because it's already well established that using immersive training simulations to help mechanics work on airplanes. This is something I built a number of years ago in the team. Or like just learn to work with other people, like social skills. But the biggest companies in the world use VR, even in headsets, to train workers. And that is clearly a superior way to do training. So there's that use case, but then there's also gaming and the fact that younger people have grown up with Roblox. They've grown up in these immersive worlds, and this is how they want to hang out. This is how they want to live, is often, spending a lot of time in these immersive worlds. And so my point there about, kids being in these massive online, not just game platforms, but kids talk about hanging out with their friends in Roblox, Kids are leading the way, is my point, in terms of the technologies that they use. And I think, to me, it seems like the lesson for those of us that are thinking about how should we evolve our schools, how should we evolve education, is kind of watch what the children are doing. Like, how do they learn? I learned to type in a class. I sat in a typewriter and learned to type. That's how old I am. But like,
me too.
our daughter,
and I loved it.
Right? It was kind of fun, right? But our daughter, literally, she never took a typing class. And when she got in front of a computer and a phone, and before that she had a feature phone with like just numerics, and so you did texting with numbers, she just learned. She just taught herself. She didn't need to go to a class to learn how to type. So, and she types quite well. So I just feel like in many areas, adults need to just get out of the way. Like, just pay attention to
I like that.
How are kids learning? Because humans are born focused on learning. Like, how does a child learn to walk? I mean, I guess maybe they watch, but they just they learn. They just do it. So humans are born to learn. So I think education is going to become much more aligned with our natural ways of learning, instead of here's a bunch of facts, memorize them, and then be able to reproduce them on a test. I mean, that's a horrible way to learn, really. especially now.
I absolutely love what you just said. Maybe we should just get out of it. but still, people that still want to be relevant in the market, they need to hurry up because those fees, they don't need us. I love that. Listen, I also I was tripping when I was uh, watching your talk on South by Southwest when you were talking about reality, and it was
Not
really
actually tripping.
little, like, I was just made my mind wander a lot. Um, and I just have a couple of questions around that. So we're for everybody that are listening to us right now. So we are going to add the link on the description. But I'm just going to say a couple of things that you said. That so you say that reality is fluid and chemically determined. That reality is created and co-created with others, and co-created by ecosystem. That it's all based on our collective perceptions. And I was just wondering, like, how will the convergence, and when thinking about everything, when thinking about reality and perception, and the stories that we are all talking to and telling to the world, and adding to that the convergence with physical and the digital worlds, with synthetic media, and things getting more real, things that are not real getting more real. It's just going to take the perception of reality to a whole new level, right? Very soon. And I was just make me wonder, like, how it's going to impact the concept, even the concept of truth, whatever truth is, right? And even the fight against misinformation, and how we are prepared for that. Because what we know, and we usually talk about that, is that currently we count on our senses to see what's truth or not, and even what's true or not, but based on our very own perception and our very own reality. But the way that we're building up on digital media and getting it to the physical world, we're just going to have a whole new layer to that. And you do mention Matrix a lot, which is amazing because it's like 2 decades ago, I think, and it's still so
25
relevant.
years. Yeah.
25 years ago, yeah. And it just sounds a little scary as well, and not wanting to be this topic here. But we're going to have, we're just going to have so many layers of different realities out there. So getting back your philosophical side out there. So what's your thought about all of that? I mean, what's the way that we're going?
I'm so curious is what I always come back to. I think, I got very upset, when this is an American politics thing, right? But like in the era of Trump's first campaign, when there was this whole one of his allies, coined this term alternative facts, right? Because someone was talking about something, and saying, well, this was really horrible, this thing he said, or this thing he did, whatever. And she was like, well, we have alternative facts, right? And so it kind of started this, or accelerated this whole conversation in the US anyway, around what is truth? Are we living in this post-truth society, right? Which is what you're referring to. I do think that what is true and how we tell whether something is true is definitely shifting and evolving, right? And I think, but this is not exactly something new. I think almost everything we believe is not the result of direct experience or direct observation, right? And we could have a whole conversation about this, but like almost everything we believe, it's like, oh, well, someone I trust told me this was the case, or someone I trust observed this, or I read it in a newspaper, or read it on a website, or I saw it on a program, and I trust those people, right? But almost everything we believe is indirect through these networks of trust, right? I don't think that's going to change. But I do think that, more and more, and for most of us, it's not in like VR or immersive digital simulations just yet, but like the realism of cinema and the kind of movies and narratives we're creating is getting so compelling that it feels more and more real, right? And so if you watch dystopian shows like Black Mirror or similar things to that, right, you can kind of see, and this is a lot of what we're feeding ourselves as humanity, right? We're creating these dystopian narratives, and we say, here's how this technology could go really bad, and we think that showing ourselves how this technology could become really horrifying is beneficial, not just as entertainment, but as a warning, right? Like, oh, we really shouldn't do that, or we should be afraid of this technology. But I think it's even more important for us to create stories that show how could this technology actually be really, really useful, right? I mean, and create a better outcome in the world, right? Here's one very simple example, right, to bring it down to earth. I think, so there's all kinds of books. I don't read that many fiction books, to be honest, right? I mean, there's all kinds of stories out there that I know the name, I'm aware of them, they're part of the culture, but I haven't read the book, right? So, but I can actually have conversations with a tool like ChatGPT about, and say, I know there's a character in this Harry Potter story, or there's a character in Dune, or there's a character in some other story, tell me about that character. Like, how do they interact with this other character? Or like, is there a subplot about this or that, and very quickly, like, have this higher level conversation about that story, even though I haven't read the book, that allows me to relate to that narrative, or incorporate it into my life or my thinking in a way that I wouldn't be able to before, And so I feel like that's a really positive outcome of this technology that, I mean, it has drawbacks, right? I didn't read the book. There's something you can only get from reading the book. But to bring it back to sort of truth and the future, I think yes, I think we're definitely evolving quickly into an era where how we tell what is true, or even how we define what is true, is just shifting. I guess another thing that I would offer is that, in the agency world, people talk about what's the brand truth, or what's the human truth, behind some campaign or some idea for a brand. And the idea of a human truth is not like so much a factual statement, but it's something that resonates, something that's meaningful for a person. And my optimism around truth and how it's changing comes from the sense that we're going to be more focused on human truths than factual truths. We're going to be focused on, like, what is actually meaningful to us, what really matters in the deepest ways. And those are the truths that are really going to drive us more and more. And it's not that facts are not important, at all, right? Obviously we need to know things like at level of physics and mechanics and chemistry and all these other things. But yeah, I think what truth is going to become more and more human and more aligned with what we deeply care about. You also asked about this whole trippy idea of reality and the nature of reality. And so I know we don't have too much more time, but and as you mentioned, and sort of before the show, we could have a whole conversation just about that. But so I would refer people to the talk I gave, because I talk about how reality is not this separate thing from us, that it's actually something that we create, that we co-create. And I reference how quantum mechanics and neuroscience both reference and have come to very similar conclusions, that reality is a result of how we interact with it. There's the concept of quantum entanglement, which and just sort of the observer effect, right? If you read quantum mechanics, which just says that things are, like, the nature of things at the particle level and perhaps even at larger levels is a result of how we observe, whether we're observing or not, like how we interact with it. similar with neuroscience. I mean, you've got world-class neuroscientists saying that really the world is presented to us as a story told to us by our brains. I mean, it's informed. It has, our sense, what we sense, what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch. I mean, those inputs are relevant, they're important, but they're not everything. That we actually kind of hallucinate reality in a real way. And then the reality is chemically determined, you mentioned, is also incorporate the fact that we can eat psychedelic mushrooms, we can drink coffee, we can use narcotics, we can do all kinds of different things that are familiar to us. And the chemical alteration of our experience changes what reality is for us, right? What we see in the case of hallucinogens or psychedelics, but also how we feel. And so all of that in my talk is really just to get people aware that reality is not this separate set of constraints that we just, it just is what it is. That reality is something that we actively impact, that we co-create it. And so if that's true, then the future is something that we really powerfully get to co-create with each other. And so that's really the whole point of the talk. And that's what's exciting to me about technology, is that especially with AI and spatial computing at this point, we have these incredibly powerful technologies that allow us to prototype, simulate, create, experience realities that we want, that we imagine. And so it's kind of a call to action. Like, let's imagine not dystopias, but imagine the reality that we really want to live in, And I think we're at this point in human evolution where that's really possible. So I'm very excited.
I get to say that we do have you have your side of optimism around that, so that's really good. And it's somehow you're calling people to action, to be actors of change instead of just stay there watching whatever is going to happen out there. So I have a last question for you. Actually, you know that I had many questions for you, but I think it will be hours and hours of discussion. So and so let's get to the final one, because I'm curious, because you told me that you're going to give me a very unusual answer. So here you go. If you could co-create a new reality with anyone from history, who would it be, and what kind of world would you build together?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a challenging question because the idea that I could narrow it down to one person from history is, it's challenging. I mean, there's so many people that I admire. I think the unusual answer that I would give is that I want to co-create reality or co-create the future with this ecosystem of humanity, right? With all of us in a way. And I feel like we're verging on this new era and the internet, I mean, the people who designed the internet had this idea of there's this concept of the global village, which is a term that was used decades ago. This concept of a global mind, right? At the internet, it's a really important step in this evolution of humanity, being able to share how we think. And I worked last year, most of the year, with a company that's very focused on using spatial computing as a way to share ideas in a visual sense, using augmented reality, share ideas with each other, like on this path to intercognition, meaning that eventually, using brain-computer interfaces, right, you and I can just, instead of having to speak, we would just think thoughts in each other's direction, like sort of share thoughts at this level. So this could be a whole other conversation, but the answer I would give is I want to co-create reality with all the people that have ever existed, and also with non-human creatures, right? I mean, that's part of the focus on nature and mycelium and how other creatures interact. So this might not be the answer you want, but I feel like I would never be able to answer that either. So no worries, right? But so I'm sorry. I thought it was the last question, but because of your answer, is
do you think we will ever be able to do it in an inclusive way? Because when you say, just computer brain interface and people can just think about it, do you think this is something that is going to be actually universally used someday? We know that we have the demand, we have supply, we have the cost, we have all of that, right? But still, considering the world that we live today, or are we just creating those bubbles for the fortunate ones, and all the rest of the humanity is going to be living this tough real life that we have today?
It's always the question, right, Maria? I think, the short answer is I don't know. I think it's hard to imagine, I guess, just because of the world that we've lived in, right? It's hard to imagine, and also because the stories that we've told and we've read, right? But even utopian visions of society, right, are still, I think they're still fraught with problems. I think they maybe don't take into account certain aspects of how humans are. And so I suppose I might take the controversial stance that maybe we don't need to solve that. I think that in some ways, humanity is the way humanity's evolving in alignment or in a kind of equilibrium with other creatures and other ecosystems on the planet is, there is ebb and flow, there is growth and decline, there is, like if you look at any other creature, any other species, not every member of that species has the same capability, or the same access to resources or things. And I actually just wonder if that's a goal that we can really solve, making sure everybody has the same access to everything. And I'm sure some people listening to this might say that's so uncompassionate, Neil, or something like this. But I think that it's important for all of us to be compassionate and to be generous and to be kind and to strive, to provide this technology to everyone we can. Before the cell phone, and yeah, Maria, this could be a longer conversation, but I would say before the cell phone, there was a lot of effort or a lot of conversation, in the 90s into almost 2010, really, right? 2005 at least. People don't have computers. All kinds of people around the world, in the depths of Africa or in India, or like, it was like, how are these people? They're just going to fall behind. There's this digital divide. And yet since then, like the vast majority of humans have access to a cell phone that's connected now. And that's made a huge difference. That's made a huge difference in the world in terms of access to information and the ability to kind of pull yourself up, whoever you are, And I think we'll continue actually to address this disparity, with the way we have with mobile phones and the way we have with global connectivity, and companies like Starlink and others are making internet connectivity available in far out places that have no wiring, no cable connection to the internet. So I do think that we will figure out how to provide these technologies to just about everybody over time. And I think part of your question, and this is how I almost answered your question this way. I was thinking if I had to choose one person in the world, I just don't know who this person is, but it would be a kind of person who's like an indigenous person who's really connected with and really understands natural ecosystems, really understands. Maybe it's someone from the Amazon, maybe it's someone who is deeply connected with the spirit and the function and the connectivity of plants in the jungle, in the forest, on the soil, to bring that expertise, that knowledge and wisdom to the co-creation of reality. Because I feel like the common thread of indigenous peoples is that most of them, I think, have survived in a very sustainable way for hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe tens of thousands of years, right? And so they really understand how to live in a way that's really aligned with the ecosystems of nature. And so definitely we want those people in active participation. And so how we do that, I mean, that is a problem we can solve, right? Like, we know where these people are. We know how to bring them into the conversation. And so as I say this, I actually am kind of getting motivated myself. My wife actually has this vision of like bringing Native Americans, into these innovation efforts, and really following their lead in terms of how they see creating like 7 generations of sustainable outcomes and so on. And so, I don't know, I think that's a very exciting possibility that I'm motivating myself as we say this to take this on.
Yeah, exactly. So, I see the sparks of a new project coming on. So I know
yes.
When it happens, you have to come back here to tell us, okay?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That was
Thanks
so
much,
lovely
Maria.
talking to you,
Likewise.
Neil. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Maria. Thank you.
Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.